Weissman, Wertheim, Rubin back with you on Tennis Channel Live. And 1 week ago today, in the second round, Denis Shapovalov was playing Roberto Carballes Baena. There was a close line call right here. Went against him. Would have given Shapovalov 2 match points in the 5th set. He ended up losing 8-6 in the 5th. Now, that led to a bunch of other players weighing in on the use of electronic line calling on clay, including Novak Djokovic, who said other than tradition, there is no reason why we should keep line umpires on the court. Actually joked that he'd also have less chances to do what he did in New York. So Djokovic is on board. Shapovalov is on board. And remember, 3 clay court events were approved for electronic line calling this year. The only one that got played was Rio because of the pandemic. But I'll start with you, John. What is the future of electronic line calling on clay?
Yeah, I mean, I think the future, we're going to get there. But to Djokovic's tweet, there is a reason why we don't have it. That's because the threshold for accuracy has not necessarily been met. And this is like a drug where the drug manufacturer essentially says, look, this could be great, but we're not quite where we need to be. I think we'll get there. Everything in technology improves and gets cheaper. That's just how technology goes. But clay is different from hard courts. And whether it's AI or whether it's cameras, whatever the technology is, it's not 100% clear that we are there yet.
Yeah, I think one thing to note is that there isn't just one technology. We've been calling it by one name, but there are multiple options when it comes to electronic line calling. And I think that's going to be the question, is which one works best on a particular surface, and in particular on the clay, where it would have to probably be recalibrated more often. There's still a lot of uncertainties. And even watching some of the reviews we've been seeing, some of those haven't always gone according to what the mark has shown, and players have been fine with it. So we're seeing certain cases where 1 or 2 go badly, but I think the majority of the time, the calls are fine.
Right, and Steve mentioned that it was used at that Rio event. Didn't hear a lot of complaints. So I think we're getting closer. It would have been nice if we'd had a bigger sample size of those other events that were canceled on account of COVID. I think, Steve, you raised this point a few days ago, which I think is really strong, which is, for now, can we be sure we're looking at the right mark? And sometimes people with the benefit of video were realizing that the mark being inspected wasn't the proper mark. That seems like the sort of stopgap measure that we should be adopting right away.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we have that technology to at least get the mark right, whether or not the chair umpire and the player agree. We've heard from Dominic Thiem. He says, I want it. Stefano Tsitsipas says, I want it. If the players, Chanda, overwhelmingly say they want it, whether or not it's ready to go, does it happen?
Well, I think it should only happen when it's ready to go. And I think if other than doing it that way, you risk players losing confidence in the system, especially if it shows on clay that it is more inaccurate. Right now, on these other surfaces, players believe in it and they are fine with it, even if there's a slight margin of error. Everybody goes with it because it's the best thing on those surfaces. So we just have to make sure that applies on the red clay as well.
Roger Federer's coach, Ivan Lubicic, had an interesting tweet. He said players might enjoy more consistency than accuracy in this case. Is that something that you think would be true?
I don't think that's true.
No?
I mean,
Okay.
the minute we saw that, we saw what Denis did, which is he basically tweeted out the evidence that he thought proved his point. I think the minute we start seeing, regardless of consistency, if we see inaccuracy, accuracy is what we all want, right? I mean, there's a lot of stakes. I mean, the difference between the winner and the runner-up here is $1 million. We need accuracy. The stakes are way too high to have inaccuracy. I think to Novak's point, yes, technology is going to be superior to the human eye, but it's just not there yet. And until it is, I don't think we want to settle for something that doesn't hit this threshold.
Chanda, I thought it was interesting watching some of the matches last night, and Jim Courier pointed out, to your point, that if they go to this technology, the electronic line calling, they are going to have to hold seminars and retrain players to not believe their own eyes. I mean, is that even possible?
No, I would not want to be trained to not believe my eyes. When you see a mark that is clearly half on the line, as an example, and players will not dispute this, but you see the electronic line review and it shows it out. That's going to be a problem. That is not something you can train players to accept. I think it could have a domino effect in terms of questioning the accuracy on other surfaces, particularly on hard court. So I think that would not be the way to go, but we'll see. Certainly, I think it is a step in the right direction that we can talk about it and that we can consider. And I think eventually it will get there. And maybe it's using the right system.
Right.
And that's the other part of this equation as well.
Okay. Quick emotional point. These are jobs. We talk about automation. It's very easy to say, yes, we want the robots, bring them on, we want accuracy. I mean, let's not forget, this would mean displacing a lot of people who, like players, have worked their way up through the ranks. There are people who've come from all over the world. They've trained. They've worked very hard to be in this position. Look, I think accuracy needs to be absolutely paramount, but I do think we need to remember that these are dedicated tennis professionals, part of this traveling circus. I don't think we should be so cavalier about saying, bring on the robots, get lost.
Well, and I guess that's two separate kind of conversations. Using electronic line calling on clay versus getting rid of umpires totally. On these surfaces and at tournaments. I think that's a whole nother discussion, because then how do umpires get trained? How do they get, the reps so that they're able to actually sit and call and officiate a match, which you could never get rid of the umpire in the chair. You would always need that person. So I think there's a lot more to that discussion.
Well, we had that at the Western and Southern Open. We had just electronic line calling for everything. So as a player, there's no questioning. Does that help you mentally in a match?
I think it could, but again, the bigger picture is, these are people who train, who work their way up the ranks, who, provide a lot more than just calling the lines. I mean, sometimes, they help in terms of when their offense is on the court, whether players are, speaking in the way they shouldn't be, or whatever may be the case. They also train and work their way up the ranks in terms of understanding how to officiate a match. And I think those are important points, as well as the job creation as well. So I think that those have to be considered when you talk about getting rid of umpires totally, or linespeople totally.
It's a French word, nuance. I mean, this is a discussion that has a lot of layers. I think for what it's worth, we should point out, too, all sports are going through this. I mean, name a sport, and they are all trying to balance this idea of sort of the naked eye and personnel and tradition with accuracy and technology. So I think this is a healthy discussion. It's evolving. The technology is only going to get better and cheaper. I think inevitably we're going to see this technology, but let's just not forget, every sector is going through this, and this is tennis's version.
Certainly. I mean, we don't want anybody to lose jobs. We do want, because as you said, the stakes are very high, to get 100% of the calls correct, and if nothing else on clay, at least find out the correct ball mark. All right.